Everyone. So I'm going to speak a little bit about cyber incidents and cyber attacks and how we can or how nations can respond against this type of incidents that are happening now every time. So this is quite a general talk. It's not going to be very technical, but it's a very interesting theme because it's all the time in the news, and it's good that you know what is going behind all this legally. So we know that the incidents are increasing rapidly and every time are more and more damaging, and they are becoming, or they have been already a concern for national security for a long time. However, until now there is no common approach about how these incidents are being addressed at the legal level, at least in national and international level. So most nations are working or have worked in what will be their approach in how they deal with incidents using their own criminal laws. There are also some approaches for international cooperation, but a lot of all these different solutions are crashing, and there is no really international organization that says, okay, this is how this should be done, or this is what we could do, mainly because there is no agreement between the nations about how this should be solved. There are different types of cyber incidents, so to say. So we have in this talk I will just concentrate in what I call cyber criminality, and in a portion of cyber criminality that will be what we call cyber attacks. And there are no agreed definitions about what all this means, so we will try to come to some definitions while I'm speaking. So okay, that should not be there, this. So the problem why we have all these challenges legally are also well known by most of the people. So one of them is the attribution. So in cyber we don't know, or it's not immediately known who is going to be the one who is initiating the attacks. And also we don't have a single jurisdiction, so the incidents go over the frontiers, over the borders of the nations. So it's very difficult to enforce your national laws when the incidents are in the people who is attacking you is in another jurisdictions. Another problem is that the incidents are targeting critical infrastructures that are mostly private managed, private operated, and somehow we need to have some cooperation with this private industry, because although this is private industries of national interest, that they are not getting targeted. So that's also a big problem. So there is also a very fine line about what you can say is cyber criminality and what you can say starts to be an attack and is of national interest. So you can see the denial of service, for example, if it's just for hacktivists, then it's just criminality, normal criminality that you can deal with international criminal law. But if it's for national interest, then it can go into the realm of cyber attack, that is national interest. The same may happen with an attack for a bank. If you are attacking a bank just for stealing some hundreds of euros, some thousands of euros for a pair of accounts, then it's just normal criminality. But if you try to bring a complete financial system or a complete bank to the bankruptcy, then it might be national interest. And the same happens with things like espionage. If you stole some documents for financial gain, then it's probably criminality. But if you stole them for national interest, then it's probably an attack. So it's a very fine line, and it's not defined exactly what is what. So that's giving a lot of problems. There are some characteristics that you can say, okay, if the originator is a nation, then you are going to speak about an attack. If the target are going to be critical infrastructures, then you might be speaking about an attack. If the motivation is for national interest, then you might be speaking about an attack. And when you are going also to speak about perceived damages, then you might speak about an attack. But these are just some characteristics. There are other also, but these are the more important. And for sure, it's not everything so easy. Like, okay, we have these characteristics, and if we know, then we have the solution, because you have problems with attribution. We spoke. We have nation-sponsor attacks. We have things like bots that you can rent. So it's very difficult to know who is the originator and what is the motivation of an attack. These are things that can always be contended, and that is very difficult that you are going to reach an agreement on that. However, there are two characteristics, like for example the target. Yeah. Okay. I hope that it gets better now. Yeah. So there are two characteristics that are, for example, the target and the perceived damages that mostly are measurable and are easy to be known. So they are always available. They cannot be contended. So if we take these two characteristics that are more easy to measure, if we go about target and about perceived damage, for targets we can see that it's quite easy to find what are, for example, critical infrastructure. So the US Presidential Directive 21, it lists all that are critical infrastructures. And it's quite a big list. So basically, almost everything is in there. So you have financial, you have food and agriculture, you have governments, healthcare. So that could be things that are important, and that if our target could be considered a cyber attack. Consider when we speak about damage, we are speaking about if the consequences of the attack resemble those of a armed attack, then you might be speaking about an attack, or if there is something that is exceptional grave. I think this is not this. Okay, it's now better. Okay, yeah, I think it's moving while I'm moving, but I hope I will try not to move much. Okay, yeah, again. Yeah. Okay, so now we can continue. It's good now. It's better, not good, but better only. Yeah, don't worry, it's okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go a little bit now that we know more or less the framework. Let's go about what the law more or less says at the high level. So when we spoke about crime, it's very good. So it's legislated by most nations. We have good criminal law almost everywhere. We have, for example, in Europe the Convention of Cybercrime, and there is a lot of international cooperation. So we have extradition, we have the European arrest warrants. So if someone is making criminal acts using cyber tools, he can be prosecuted, and there are tools for getting them. But when you speak about attacks, then basically there is nothing. So there was a UN United Nations initiative to make some legal instruments against cyber attacks, but it didn't get very far, so it was halted. And at the moment, there is nothing that has been agreed by all nations. The only thing, well, these are just some examples of the United Nations, the CAM-SPAN Act, Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. So we have a lot of legislation. Most of examples are from the USA, but we have everywhere. This is the closest thing that we have to a guideline about how we should act when we speak about cyber attacks, but it comes with a lot of caveats. So the first thing, if you read there down, it's prepared by an international group of experts at the invitation of the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence. So that means first that this is not done by NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, but this is done by a group of experts. So that means this captures the ideas of this group of experts. Of course, they are very well-renowned experts, but are just ideas of experts, are not something that nations have said. The second caveat is the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence is in fact not NATO. Although the name might indicate that, it's just an organization that is grounded by some countries and that is funded by these countries, but is not capturing what NATO or NATO nations said. However, with all these caveats, it's still the only or the best approach that we have at the moment for how cyber attacks could be treated legally. It works by making an analogy between what incidents in the cyber war are and what incidents in the kinetic war are. And it just tries to say, okay, if a cyber attack will be compared to what a kinetic attack will do, how will we deal with it? And with this analogy, he says that he can use what is called international humanitarian law, so basically the United Nations chart. So we go to the definitions. The first one is what could be a cyber attack. And for the Tallinn manual, a cyber attack is a cyber operation, whether offensive or defensive, that is reasonably expected to cause injury or death to persons and damage or destruction to objects. So there are some points that are important. One is when it says is reasonable expected. That means it's not only that you are causing, but also if the action is foreseen to cause something, then it's still covered under this definition. And the other is that it speaks really about damage, destruction of persons, people dying, so it speaks about physical effects. So if the cyber attack reminds in what is the cyber war and does not cause injury or death, then according to this definition, it's not an attack and it will not be treated like an attack. However, there are other definitions. So I put there one from Juana Hathaway, that is also a researcher that is working a long time on this. And she just says, a cyber attack consists of any action taken to undermine the functions of a computer network for a political or national security purpose. So it's completely different. Here she spoke about the purpose of the attack, not about the results. And here she spoke about any action. So it does not have to cause physical damage in order to be attacked. So it's the problem that there is no agreement on what the basics of what an attack is. Okay, so now we are going to start speaking about the United Nations charts. So what the Tallinn manual basically says. The first thing that we have to consider when we start speaking about the attack in the kinetic war, and then we will see how we translate that into the cyber world, is whether you are in war or not. So there are two different corps of law. One is the jus in bello, and the other is the jus ad bellum. So the jus in bello is going to tell you what you can do when you are in war. So it's going to tell you you are already in a war, you are fighting, you are killing people. This is what is allowed, and this is what is not allowed. So basically, if you are going to do this, you will be a war criminal, while all these other actions are allowed. So I'm not going to discuss much about that, because in war, it's quite a lot of people die, and the legality there about cyber I think is not that important. The jus ad bellum is more important, because it's where more of these cyber actions are taking place. So it's when a nation has the right to initiate a war. So you are not in war, you are in peace status, but someone is cyber attacking you, is making some hostile actions against you. And then the question is, do these actions give you right to respond or give you right to initiate a war? Is these actions that you are receiving are even considered an attack? So this is what we are going to speak about right now. The first point to start is the Article 2, the chapter 4, the Article 2 of the United Nations. So it says, what you can read there, that basically says that you have to refrain from the use of force. So it says it's prohibited for all nations that are part of the United Nations to use force against other nations. So with that definition, is quite easy. Now we just have to say it's a cyber incident, use of force. If we know if it's use of force, then we are done. But of course, it's not that easy. So here you have a representation, more or less, of what we spoke when we say use of force. So you have there the two blue bullets. This is coercion. Coercion is normally accepted. So you can use coercion against nations. We have, going a little bit more to the right, we have interference. That's a little bit on the borderline. You should, depending on the interpretation, might be allowed or not legally. And then you start going into the realm of use of force. And when you go really farther, the highest representation of use of force will be an armed attack, in which you use weapons, kinetic weapons, to attack a country. So it's important, this difference between use of force and armed attack, because we'll see that there, in these green brackets between use of force and armed attack, there are a gray area in which nations cannot effect self-defense. So you are being attacked, someone is doing something illegal against you, but you cannot self-defense against that. That's what we can see here, the Article 51 of the United Nations. This article basically says that you can use self-defense if you are the target of an armed attack. So the United Nations says nations cannot use force against you, but you can only self-defense if that force goes to the level of an armed attack. There is this area there, this gray area of use of force, in which you are still being not really, well, yeah, we can consider even attack. It's not an armed attack, but you are being attacked, but you cannot self-defense yourself. And this is very clever from the United Nations, because that's to avoid the escalation of force. So basically what they try to say is, okay, we don't want that you respond, and then this response will escalate to a war. So we have this gray area there in which you can respond by other means. You can, for example, use coercion, but you should not respond by attacking the other country. You have not the right to self-defense yourself. Even when you go into the area of what we will call the armed attack, then still, even when you have the right to self-defense, it's not that you can just execute self-defense as you want. So there are some rules there about necessity and proportionality. Necessity tells you that you can just self-defense if it's basically the last option that you have, if you have no other options. A proportionality tells you that first you have to assess what were the damage that were done to you, and you have to respond proportionally to those damages. So, summarizing what we have until now, so if you are subject to an armed attack, you will have right to self-defense. If someone is just threat or using the force to you, then you cannot self-defense. We can imagine already now that a broad range of cyber attacks fall into this gray area in which you cannot not self-defense. They are illegal, they are wrongful, but they are non-forceful. So in this area, that we'll say you can use coercion, you can use sanctions, you can use maybe the countermeasures doctrine, but you should not be able to go to war, basically. That's because we will see that the cyber war that is spoken a lot of times, it's maybe a little bit exaggerated, at least legally. So about countermeasures that I was just mentioning. So these are unilateral and non-forceful measures, so they don't involve armed force. That's because it could be a possibility to respond to a cyber attack. And they are done exactly for that, for defending about internationally wrongful acts. The problem with countermeasures, well, there are a lot of caveats, but one of them is that the idea is to stop the wrongdoing state to do whatever they are doing. And they cannot be used as a kind of revenge. So basically, I use the countermeasures to force you to stop attacking me, and once you have a stop, we are done. So in some conditions it could be used, but this is probably not the panacea that will solve all the problems. Okay, we were speaking about this area that we say is a cyber attack, and we say that if we have a cyber attack, then we can trigger self-defense. Now we go into what we can say is a cyber attack. And there are three different views. There is no agreement also here. There is people that say that a cyber attack is considered an armed attack only if conventional military weapons are used. So that restricts it quite a lot because you don't use conventional military weapons for cyber. So an example could be, for example, bombing computer servers. So that's a very restrictive view. Basically, if you took that view, all cyber attacks will be just probably use of force, but none of them will escalate to what we call an armed attack. We have another view that is the target-based approach. This goes just on the other side of the scala. So in this case, it takes that everything that target a system that is important enough, it can be considered an attack. So if you are targeting a critical system, it will be an attack, irrelevant of whether you make damage or not. Just for targeting such a system, you are already attacking me. So the problem with that view, of course, is that it will escalate. So it will give with the grounds for a lot of nations to trigger self-defense, and it will initiate a lot of wars. So the last view is the effect-based approach, and this is the one that is defended by most people. Basically says what you can see there. A cyber attack, it will be an attack if you can say that you can see that the effects of the attack are those that you could cause with a kinetic weapons. So if you are destroying something, if you are killing people, and this killing or this destruction is caused not by bombs but by cyber, it does not matter how you have caused, it still is an attack because it's the same damage that you are causing. This is the main way to go, and this is also what the Tallinn manual proposes. So now this was basically what is there in what is law. Now what I will go is through some examples of cyber incidents. I will go from the low level to the highest level, and I will discuss a little bit based on what we have learned what could or how could we react against them. So that the lowest level will be fingerprinting or making some kind of traffic analysis, traffic monitoring. For this kind of things, I don't think that anyone is going to be worried about that. Not at the national level, not at the international level. They are probably legal, and there are no legal implications for doing those things. If we go into a spoofing, when you are masquerading a user or a site and you try to gain some illegitimate benefit with it, well, there are some legislations that will already criminalize spoofing. And mainly if you say that it's going to be for making illegal acts. So if you are going to commit fraud or you are going to perpetrate a crime, that could be prosecuted by criminal law in some legislations, but it still does not go through to the levels of use of force or these things that we spoke. When we spoke about vulnerability scanning that a lot of people here is maybe doing. So in this case, there are legislations for prosecuting vulnerabilities, and they can be prosecuted if you disclose vulnerabilities and the company does not like what you are doing. Depending on which legislation you are, you can have problems. The US Digital Millennium Copyright Act can or cannot be, depending on which view you use, but it could be used for prosecuting disclosure of vulnerabilities. And in other nations, it's just a gray area, and there are still a lot of discussion. Social engineering, you all know that is quite illegal. So they can charge you with wire fraud, with fraud related to activities in connection with access device, unauthorized use of credit cards. There is the use can expand. There is the privacy and electronic communications of the United Kingdom. So if you make social engineering, again, this is still on the realm of criminal law. It will not go to the levels that we were speaking during the international humanitarian law. So we go a little bit higher. We are going to speak now about misuse, and for that I understand basically use system resources for unplanned processes. So this is just installing a malware, for example. It's something so simple like installing the malware. You are not stealing anything, you are just installing the malware there. So still that's illegal in most legislations, so they can charge you with things like unauthorized access to computer material, access with intent to commit or facilitate commission of offense, or unauthorized modification of computer material. The Budapest Convention that we spoke before from the Council of Europe, it tells the nations that they should criminalize this kind of offenses. And you have, for example, the UK misuse acts that also say this is an offense because you are basically making damage to the computer. So you are impairing the operation of a computer, and you should not be doing that. So this is just for changing some bytes in the computer, even if you are not stealing any data or you are not doing anything. So it's quite strong legally. Denial of services that you have also almost everywhere nowadays is also illegal under most national laws. So you have the Article 4 of the Budapest Convention. It also tells the companies to criminalize that. You have the US Computer Fraud and Abuse Act that also speaks about causing damages without authorization to a protected computer. And you can discuss, okay, denial of service is not causing damages, but it is because they define damage as the impairment of availability. So that covers the denial of service. And then it comes because this is also quite used, this has been used in a lot of conflicts against nations. And then the question is can this be considered an armed attack? So For this, there is not much discussion because the United Chart, the Article 41, is quite clear on that. So it lists here a list of measures that they say that they do not involve the use of armed force. And between these measures, you can see that is the partial interruption of economic relations and of sale, receive, air, postal, telegraphic, radio, and other means of communication. Well, you can of course discuss if it's a mean of communication, but I think from my interpretation, it's quite clear that it will be covered into this Article 41. So data leakage, here we are speaking now about espionage. Basically, you are stealing documents from a company, you are stealing documents from a firma. Curiously enough, it does not fall under international laws. So it's very damaging. It's criminalized by the national laws. The national criminal laws criminalize espionage, but the international laws do not say anything. So it's not an attack, it's not a use of force, it's internationally accepted that they all do it, and they are not going to go to war for that. Whoever nationally, of course, they will prosecute it. For example, the German penal code, you have there whoever gathers information or produces or acquires hacking tools with the intention to gain unjustified access to somebody else's data will be prosecuted. So that means all nations will prosecute it locally, but you will never go to war because they are spying. It's quite curious, this German penal code, because it's even just developing the tools can be criminalized. I didn't know that, but it's very strong. So now we are going to the highest levels in which you, for example, modify data. You are intentionally going to modify data. This is nationally, this is the same like the misuse that we spoke before. And in fact, if you modify data, then they might charge you first with misuse because you access the computer, and then with other charges because you again made all the things like altering data. Can we say that this is an armed attack? So there is discussion. There is people that say, of course, because you can tamper data in such a way, for example, that you can bring the complete financial system of a country to the ground. You can just delete all the accounts of a country and just bring the complete financial system out, and that will be grave enough and targeting a system that is important enough to be considered an attack. It's theoretically possible. I personally think that that will never happen, because in particular the banks, they have a strong business continuity and disaster recovery. So they are one of the few organizations that they do good with cyber, mainly because they know that they are dealing about money, and they have a lot of regulations that tells them what they have to do. And I cannot imagine that a bank can be attacked and they don't have the means to recover from a backup or from another alternative site within hours, and that they will just lost all the data. That will be really something very difficult, in my opinion. And these are the two cases in which you could start speaking about really an armed attack. So if you are able to make a denial of service to a system, and this system is controlling physical resources, and you can, for example, deny the people to access to emergency services or to ATMs or to electricity or water networks or sensors networks. So in that cases, you could cause death of people, you could cause damages, and that could go to the level of attack. And the same happen if you explode system vulnerabilities with the aim to destroy things, and that was the case of Stuxnet. So these two could be armed attack, but then the question is, okay, in order to be an armed attack, still we have to speak about the severity. If the severity is similar to what you will do with an armed attack, then this will be two cases that could be covered by international law, as defined by the Talent Manual, of course. So in practical use, so that you know already because you see it in the news, but that you see the application of all this that we are discussing. So when you saw Stuxnet, most of the people say Stuxnet was at least an act of force, if not an armed attack. However, you wouldn't see Iran going to the United Nations and saying they are going to start a war. What they resorted to is to attack or retaliate, attacking US banks. That's what they did. So although they will have grounds to go farther, they didn't choose to do that. The same happened if you see these persistent threats, the reports on the persistent threats 1 and 28. So they are well known. It's known that they are doing espionage, they are doing sabotage, they are misusing, data tampering, spoofing. They are doing a lot of wrong things against nations. However, for ATP 28, as far as I know, there have been no actions against them. So they say they have attribution problems with that. So they have not done anything. Against the one about the ones that is attributed to China. Also, it's not that they have initiated any action in the United Nations or tried to say, okay, I'm being, well, okay, in the press, yeah, in the press you will say they are being attacked, but in reality, they will not respond legally as if they are being attacked. They will respond legally as if it's a criminal act, and this is what they did. They just indicted 5 people and tell them, okay, you are accused of hacking, economic espionage, and these kind of things. Also, they knew that in fact they are hardly or ever going to get those people, but this is basically the only solution that they had. So to conclude the talk, what we can see in this talk is that basically at the end the nations will resort mostly to international criminal law, and international criminal law I think is the way to go to sort these kind of conflicts. Even if it's difficult that you get extradition from some countries, for example, it's most likely that you are going to request that you are going to try to start a war. And this means also that I believe that cyber work is highly unlikely, and it's a term that is very exaggerated. If there are attacks that will be damaging, most of them are going to fall under use of force, and you are not going to have the possibility to self-defense. So this is not going to escalate to a war, nevertheless. And there is just a very, very small slice of attacks that you could say, okay, this is an attack that could be able to start a war, but this is really small, and they are just covered in this international law that we discussed in this Tallinn manual. But again, this is not even accepted by all nations, so it does not mean that if you are going with that to the United Nations, they will say, yeah, you are right, and you have now the right to self-defense. They can always say, this is just the opinion of some people, and we have another opinion. And another important takeaway is that I don't think this is going to change in the future. So the nations are not working, as far as I know, into cooperating in this area. So mostly this that they have told will continue far away. It's also a nice area because at the moment everyone is trying to operate into this area of use of force. And they all know that as long as they operate into this area of use of force and you don't go through this threshold in which you will cause massive damages or kill someone, you are quite safe to go. There is nothing that the other nations can do against you apart of maybe complaining or making some kind of coercion. And therefore it's a quite good scenario for everyone. So that will be, if you have any questions.
Manual?
No, this is just my personal view. This is just a summary of the Tallinn manual with my comments and my personal view, and that's also because I'm not presenting it under any mission.
And now that the Tallinn manual is a NATO product, basically.
No, it's not.
Well, I looked at the list of people who wrote it, the experts. They were mostly affiliated with NATO or NATO-friendly
I don't believe it.
institutions. How many Chinese, how many Russians, how many Iranians were on that Tallinn manual authored list, right? Are you aware of similar documents from other groups?
I'm not aware, at least, of a document that has get the wide audience of this document. Maybe they have written something, but I'm not aware of it. And regarding your question, it might be that the authors there are Eastern authors. That's for sure true. It's for sure not true that this is a NATO document. So it has nothing to do with NATO.
Well, let's leave it at that. I have a question about your very last slide too. It says, you say cyber war is highly unlikely.
Yeah.
What I see is that big nations are all hiring what they call cyber warriors.
Yeah.
And I would say Stuxnet was a type of cyber war thing. The question is, how do you define cyber war when you say it's highly unlikely?
Yeah, you are right. What I'm trying to say is that it's highly unlikely that because of all this, we were speaking about all these cyber incidents, and I was showing you that in fact none of them really escalate to the level of what will be considered an attack in this United Nations framework. So if you don't have attacks, if United Nations does not recognize those actions as attacks, then you can never have a war because you are never attacking the other country. You are of course doing illegal things, but it's not an attack. So as long as you don't go through this level that says now you are attacking the other country and I recognize that you are attacking the other country, you can never be in war. You will be making illegal things, you will be using force maybe, but you are never attacking the other country. And this is also what a lot of people try to stay under this threshold in which you will go into an attack. And like you were mentioning, Stuxnet, yeah, that could be maybe the only case in which arguable you could speak about an attack. But even that, most of the people think it was just use of force, not even an attack.
What about the UN and the US government's staff files? You know how the US government personal management office was hacked and tens of thousands of their staff, including CIA staff and their security clearance applications and all these things was taken. So that's also very serious. And I think there are a lot more things we don't hear about.
Yeah, it's in that case, for example, if you follow this reason that we were speaking, it's very serious, but you are speaking about espionage, and espionage again is not recognized as an attack. So you could not go to war because of that, probably. I'd say these are just, nevertheless, there is no nation that have say, okay, I agree with this. These are just ideas of a group of experts. So does not mean that this is the truth. There is no tribunal also that have say this is the truth and this is we have this request from this nation and we accept it. So there is no prior jurisprudence that you can say this is we know that we can use this. So unless you have this some tribunal in The Hague or wherever that says okay, we recognize this as an attack, then it's just discussions.
Any further questions? Anyone? Okay, no, we'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Oscar Serrano.
Thank you very much.